So Mohamed Salah, Virgil van Dijk, Heung-min Son, Kevin De Bruyne, just four players who are out of contract at the end of this season who are over the age of 30. Mark, you've been looking at this. Why are clubs so reluctant to give players over the age of 30 new deals or longer deals? We see fitness is better than ever. The players are in better condition than ever before. Why is it still such a tipping point for clubs in their planning?
Well, this is the issue, and I think this is focused on Mo Salah really, because we know that Mo Salah is probably the biggest of the big three at Liverpool that are out of contract at the end of the season. Salah's going to be 33 next summer. He's out of contract. He's Liverpool's highest earner, and they still haven't given him a new contract. Now, why are clubs like Liverpool so reluctant to give their star players big deals? Well, the reality is that clubs look at the potential of a diminishing asset in 18 months' time, a potential liability. Fans or people like ourselves don't look at the player that's scoring lots of goals right now, and I think that's the issue that clubs like Liverpool have to address. Is that yes, Mo Salah is playing like one of the best players in the world right now. He's 32 years old, but what will he be like in 2 or 3 years' time if he's on a contract which is potentially worth £500,000 a week? It's a huge cost to cover if a player at 34, 35 is only playing one every 3 games and not scoring goals. So that is the issue to address. Now, I think with Mo Salah, I think it's a no-brainer. You give him a contract because you look at him, he's potentially another Cristiano Ronaldo that could play till his late 30s. Lionel Messi, he's such a good professional. He's never had a serious injury that I can recall. So Mo Salah for me is in great condition that you could give him a 2 or 3 year contract and not be too concerned about what it will be like in 3 years' time. Let's flip it to Kevin De Bruyne. Kevin De Bruyne, I think he'd be 34 if he's not 34 already. I think he's 34 next summer. Out of contract at Man City. Different scenario completely. Kevin De Bruyne has had 2 or 3 years now where he's had injuries that have disrupted his seasons, disrupted his appearances in cup finals. The Champions League final he went off injured. FA Cup final, I think he went off injured. So if you're Man City, the decision with Kevin De Bruyne is a different one to the decision with Liverpool and Mo Salah. So it's having to assess whether these players that are giving such great service and have massive fans' favourites, what are they doing now and what can they do in 2 or 3 years' time? And I think that is the issue that clubs have to deal with. And I think with older players, it's one that you have to look on a case-by-case basis. I guess Virgil van Dijk, again, he's had a serious injury, as we know. At Liverpool, he had a crucial ligament injury 2 or 3 years ago, but he's come back to fantastic form. But as a centre-half who relies on his pace and his reading of the game, won't change, but in 3 years' time, what will Virgil van Dijk be like in terms of pace? So that's why Van Dijk is different to Salah, is different to Kevin De Bruyne, and clubs have to treat these players differently when they get to 32, 33, 34.
We should just say on Heung-min Son, I mean, my information there is that Spurs have got an option for another year, which they can trigger, and I think they will trigger. So at least they can kick the can down the road a little bit with him. Just on Salah, Mark, I know what you mean about the sort of the conditioning, and I'm quite cynical about this kind of thing. But do you remember the other week when Salah scored a penalty and then took his shirt off? And you just sort of think, how deliberate is this to sort of say, do you think there's something in that? He's been quite pointed with speaking to reporters in mixed zones and trying to get it out there that, he's not quite been given the offer that he wants. But to sort of score and then take his shirt off and, just show how ripped he is, it felt a little bit deliberate to sort of say, look, this is the kind of condition you're not signing an OAP here,
Yeah, it's look at me, look at the condition I'm in. He's in better condition than many 23-year-olds, and never mind a 33-year-old. So I don't think you could question Salah. I guess with Liverpool as well, Salah is tied. If it was just Salah on his own, I think he might have had a contract by now, but he's tied into Van Dijk and Alexander-Arnold. If they give Salah a contract first, it creates, consequences for the other two. But I think on his own, I don't think it'd be an issue. Look, the game has changed, as we know. I mean, I remember, back in the early to mid-2000s, Man United had a policy whereby as soon as a player hit 30, that was it. They get a 1-year contract, nothing more. Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, Dennis Irwin, these players would only get a 1-year deal. Now, if you're 30 now and you're getting a 1-year deal, that would be very unusual. I think clubs are a bit wiser to it now. I think players expect longer contracts because they've shown that they can go on for longer. We've mentioned Ronaldo and Messi, Luka Modric at Real Madrid, still late 30s, still not going strong, but he's still certainly effective. But I was told a story about another player that I won't name, but his club let him go at the age of 33. And he was a big fan favourite, and the fans were up in arms about letting this player go. He actually signed for a local rival, and I said to one of the guys at the club, "So why have you let him go? He's still doing it." He said, "Look, when you get to that age, 33, you can either carry on or you can fall off a cliff." Anyway, he went to his new club, played less than 10 games and fell off a cliff. So the people at the clubs who study the data day to day, they know what's coming. They know what players can do. They see the training performances, and they know exactly what they're going to be like next year and the year after. So I think when fans look at clubs letting players go at that age, they probably think, why are they doing that? Well, inside the club, they know everything they need to know about the player. Now, obviously, mistakes have been made. We know that certain players have seem to go on forever. Look at Zlatan. He was, again, late 30s, early 40s when he finished. But, what will Man United do with Christian Eriksen, for instance? Christian Eriksen, 6 months up on his contract, early 30s. Again, it's one of these situations where you have to look at what they're doing now and what they could do in a year's time. And I think it's difficult. But Mo Salah, for me, I think Salah, if I was in charge at Liverpool, I'd give him a 3-year contract straight away. But then I'd have Alexander-Arnold and Virgil van Dijk knocking on the door demanding the same.
Do you think PSR is a factor here, guys? I mean, it's, we talk about how you're sort of the other end of the scale, that academy graduates are being sold for pure profit because it shows up well on the balance sheet and it can help, reinvest elsewhere. But it's also, it doesn't look great in terms of amortization and trying to balance the books if you're giving, you're committing huge sums of money to players with no resale value at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's the PSR thing has come to dominate transfer windows, hasn't it? And United are still talking about being forced almost to sell Scott McTominay to Napoli when no one at the club really wanted to, because of that, the bonus that you get from selling academy graduates. And I think the same thing is true when you're looking at giving older players new contracts. I mean, you kind of just said it there, that you're basically committing an awful lot of money to players who have got no resale value. Invariably, all of these players that we're talking about, Mo Salah, Virgil van Dijk, Son, are all among, or if not the highest paid players at their clubs, and they would be well within their rights to say, well, I want the same, if not more, to sign an extension. The further they get in their careers, that the more years they add, the less likely it is that they move on somewhere. I suppose you've got a situation with Salah where could you eventually still get a big offer from Saudi Arabia to take him there, and then you can, at least you've got something to show for that investment, possibly. But is that going to happen with Van Dijk or with De Bruyne or with Son? Probably not. So essentially, you are. I don't want to say throwing money away, because obviously these are top level players, but you are in a situation where you are committing vast amounts of money to players who, presumably at the end of these next contracts, whether it's Salah or De Bruyne, are going to say, right, I'm walking away now. Now I'm going to go to Saudi Arabia or America, and you're not going to get a penny in return. So I'm sure it does play a part in these clubs' decisions. I think the other thing to think about is something that's not, you can't be measured in data or anything physical, is, the effect that these players have on the dressing room. Salah is still in peak physical fitness, but the older you get, the more likely it is that you're going to have to play a more and more reduced role at these clubs. And we're already seeing that a little bit with Kevin De Bruyne. And it's about how these players deal with that and can cope with that, and whether they're even willing to take that on, or whether you're going to be left with, your senior man in the dressing room and your highest paid player not causing trouble, but having a moan behind the scenes saying, I should be playing more games. Why am I not playing 40 or 50 games? Why am I only playing 20 or 25? So these are all the things that come into making these decisions with these top players, because it can be destructive, these kind of things. I mean, there's already a danger with Liverpool that the conversations with Salah and Van Dijk and Trent Alexander-Arnold are overshadowing what could be an absolutely fantastic season for them, a season that no one really saw coming. But if you get to sort of January, February, and people are still talking about Mo Salah, there is a danger that all of this is going to start to distract from what the team are doing on the pitch and what Arne Slot is doing with his squad.
I think we can see in real time, actually, in terms of an example as to clubs making the right. I'm just looking at these stats now. So Ilkay Gundogan was let go by Man City at the end of his contract 18 months ago. They just won the treble. He was a massive part of winning that treble. Went to Barcelona. And you could argue that City made the right call on Gundogan, that they got rid of him at the right time. He went to Barcelona, didn't have a great season, but then they brought him back on a free transfer. And we think look at Ilkay Gundogan this season. he looks like he's completely out of his depth in the Premier League. He can no longer cope with the pace of it. He was overrun at Anfield during the defeat against Liverpool. And I think that shows you that clubs can make the right call, but also the wrong call. And the right call at City was letting him go. The wrong call was bringing him back. He's 34 years old now, and obviously his contract expires in the summer. They won't keep him on. But it shows you that you can let a player go when you think he's at the peak of his powers. But the reality is in 6 months' time, he isn't. And he wasn't at Barcelona. He certainly isn't now. So clubs have to make that decision based on the long term. I think City got it right then, but they probably got it wrong by bringing him back.
Is
It
this in the
happens
balance,
very, very quickly, doesn't
the
it?
balance with De Bruyne then? Do we think De Bruyne is, because what will he be? He'll be 34 in June.
I think De Bruyne is he's got so many miles on the clock now. He's been a brilliant player for Man City, one of the absolute legends. But I think you look at the amount of games he's missed, you look at the injuries he's had, hamstring injuries. I just don't see how City keep him on. I really don't. I think what we're seeing right now is that they're showing a bit of respect for a guy that's done so much for the club. They don't want to say that letting him go. But I don't see Kevin De Bruyne staying at Man City for that reason. I think, he's 34. And what will he be like at the end of next season if he's struggled to play games for the last 2 years? I think that's just managing a situation that's very difficult and delicate. But I don't know what you guys think, but I don't think De Bruyne could seriously be given a new contract.
The only way I see him staying is if he accepts a bit part role, and that's a different situation to Salah, because Salah still looks like he can play 40 games a year. De Bruyne, to me, doesn't look like he can do that. I still think on his day, and we saw again in the Forest game, that he is still one of the best players in the Premier League, but I don't think that he can churn out that kind of form for 45, 50 games. Mark's already said that he's had 2 quite big injury layoffs in the last 18 months. The only way I see him staying is if City sit down with him and say, you are going to play 20, 25 games and maybe be sub in another 15. Are you happy with that? And then it's up to him. If he wants to go and play more regular football or get a massive payday, whether it's in MLS or Saudi Arabia, then, he deserves all that. I think it will be up to him to decide what kind of impact he wants to have on a team that he's at next year, whether he's happy at City, to play a reduced role and see someone else brought in his position and maybe have a little bit more competition for his place, or whether he says, no, look, I'm going to be 34 in the summer. I want to squeeze every last drop out of my career. I want to go and play every single week somewhere else. I think that's the decision that he's going to be faced with.